This virtual meeting will now be called to order to receive Her Worship the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Your Worship. We're now live.
Thank you. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the full council. It's 7 p.m. on Tuesday, the 30th of March, 2021. My name is Councillor Linda Eaton and I am the Mayor and Chair of this meeting. And my fellow councillor, Councillor Lily Kaufman, is the Deputy Mayor and Vice Chair. In accordance with the regulations made under Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, this remote meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The audio-visual recording will also be made available on the Council's website and YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. All meeting participants are reminded to speak slowly and clearly in the direction of their device's microphone at all times. A reminder that mobile phones and other electronic devices should be turned off or put on silent mode, and those participating in the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. For the purpose of the recording of attendance, I can confirm that the following members are present and participating in this remote meeting. Councillor Rosemary Adams, Councillor Naveed Alam, Councillor Lee Bentley, Councillor Bill Bolter, Leader of the Council, Councillor John Boyce, Councillor Linda Broadley, Councillor David Carter, Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Michael Charlesworth, Councillor Ladeef Dar, myself, Councillor Dean Gamble, Councillor Samir Hack, Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Priti Joshi, Councillor Lily Kaufman, Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman, Councillor Claire Kozlowski, Councillor David Lloydall, Councillor Kevin Lloydall and Councillor Sharon Morris. We also have the following officers in attendance: Samuel Ball, Assistant Solicitor, Emily Byrne, Democratic Services Officer, Anne Court, Chief Executive and Head of Paid Service, Commy Campbell, Head of Finance and Acting Section 151 Officer, Philippa Fisher, Head of Customer Service and Transformation, David Gill, Head of Law and Democracy and Monitoring Officer, Margaret Kind, Corporate Assets Manager, Avril Lennox, Head of Community and Wellbeing, Adrian Thorpe, Head of Built Environment, Stephen Tucker, Democratic and Electoral Services Manager, and John Wells, Senior Environmental Health Officer and COVID-19 Lead, who will be joining the meeting later on this evening. Finally, we also have the following invited guests: Laurie Faulkner, Independent Remuneration Panel. Laurie, who will be joining the meeting later this evening. For the purposes of the regulations, I can confirm that before this remote meeting went live, all participants confirmed that they can see and or hear all other participants. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with the Council's adopted remote meeting procedure rules, a summary of which is attached to tonight's agenda for reference. May I also politely remind all participants that they must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the Council's proper conduct of its business. Thank you. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Your Worship. We've received apologies this evening from Councillor Frank Broadley, Councillor Robert Eaton, Councillor Gatterea, Councillor Core, Councillor Helen Lloydall and Councillor Richard Morris, and we've received notification that Councillor Ridley is running late but hopefully joining the meeting at some point later on.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Nobody with their hands up.
Sorry, Your Worship, There are 2 councillors with their hand raised, the first David Lloydall and the second Kevin Lloydall.
So, Samuel, I'm sorry, before we go much longer, I can't get the list of participants up at the side of my screen, so I don't know who's got their hand up.
Your Worship, would you like us to monitor that for you and invite councillors to speak?
Well, the only councillor I've got is Councillor Linda Broadley. I haven't got anybody else on the the side of my.
We can monitor that for you, Your Worship.
It would
Okay.
help, thank you.
Councillor David Lloydell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to raise a potential interest in one of the exempt items that I would seek advice from the head of law at the time, if that's okay.
Thank you. We'll bear that in mind. If you just remind us again when it's time before we start the exempt item.
Thank you.
Councillor Kevin Lloydell.
Thank you, Worship. As a matter of consistency, I would like to item 12, which is the scheme of members' allowance. The independent panel. I've sat in court when I was a magistrate, both with Laurie Faulkner and John Whiting. I've done that every time this has come up. As a matter of consistency, as I say, I've actually declared that interest. It doesn't prohibit me from doing anything or not voting on the paper. Thank you.
And can I also mention that I too have sat with Laurie Faulkner from the Independent Remuneration Panel. I've sat in court with him as well, just for consistency.
Councillor Gamble, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble.
I'd like to declare non-pecuniary interest in item agenda 18 as I'm employed by a major retailer in one of our town centres, but I shall, on legal advice, stay and take this agenda item and vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Gill, any comment at this stage?
At this stage, no objection. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Agenda item 4. Minutes of the previous meeting. Before we consider the minutes of the previous meetings, I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Michael Charlesworth, to make a personal statement on the same. Councillor Charlesworth, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This statement relates to the meeting of the Council on the 18th of February, where we discussed the MTFS. I made several comments that evening regarding the MTFS, which I now realise were unacceptable. I acknowledge I didn't breach the code of conduct, but the officer member protocol was breached, and I accept responsibility for that. I apologise to any officer whose professionalism I may have called into question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charlesworth. Unless members have any comments or objections, may the minutes be approved and signed by general affirmation.
No hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, action list arising from the previous meeting. There was no action list arising from the previous meeting. Agenda item 6, motions on notice. Are there any motions on notice?
None received, Your Worship.
Thank you. Agenda item 7, petitions, deputations and questions.
None received, Your Worship.
Thank you. Agenda item 8, Mayor's announcements. As all civic engagements undertaken by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor in person have been suspended during the COVID pandemic, there are no announcements to make. Agenda item 9, Leader's Statement. Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I start by talking about virtual meetings? For most of us, virtual meetings have been a bit of a pain, and they are much harder to participate in and to actually interact with people. Having said that, one of the most unexpected things that has happened since virtual meetings have started is that public interest and public participation, in the sense that they watch and listen, has grown significantly. And indeed, what people won't realise is 28 people listened to the extraordinary meeting earlier this evening, including the university, who have sent me a personal letter thanking us for giving them the freedom of the borough, and I've also sent that out to all members. But it does show that we are much more in the public eye, and therefore our behaviour at these meetings becomes that much more important. As equally, the government have said that from May the 7th or 6th or whatever date it is, we go back to real meetings. That will have a knock-on effect on the AGM, because at the moment the AGM is on the 11th. COVID rules do not kick in until the 17th, and therefore we are in the process of putting the AGM back a week so that we are legally able to meet indoors in a COVID safe environment. Details of that will follow. Having said that, lawyers in local government are, with the support of the LGA, by the way, are taking the government to court. Their view is that actually there is sufficient leeway in current law for members to meet virtually now and continue meeting virtually. Having said all of that, I think it's fairly clear that come June 21st onwards, we will go back to some form of meeting in person. It's also clear that we need to look at ensuring the public participation achieved so far can be captured and built on. Unfortunately, our current chamber does not have the capability of broadcasting live. It is something we will need to investigate. We are clearly thinking of moving away from Bushlow House at some point in the foreseeable future. It may well be that we can purchase equipment now which will be able to be moved. However, that is a piece of work which will have to be carried out in the forthcoming weeks and months. But we will need to try and get back online as soon as possible, so that the public can continue to listen to us and take note of what we say. Moving on, the government have also sent out a message saying that we should fly the flag more. I've nothing against flying the flag, but I'd rather do it on special occasions. Nonetheless, if any member has a comment on that, they may wish to raise it. We may need to discuss it in the future. COVID. Clearly, COVID's had a massive impact on the borough and on its residents. In fact, our death rate is getting on for 300 per 100,000, which is pretty stark, frankly. Having said that, in the last few weeks, our numbers have improved and have come down somewhat. And yes, they've been going up, but now they came down yesterday. So we're around about 64 per 100,000, which is a significant improvement on where we've been. But we do need to keep on at the message. It's important to get a vaccine if you're entitled. It's important to get the second jab. People shouldn't simply say, I've got it once and therefore I don't need it. And it's important that we stress the public safety message of distance. Keeping your distance, certainly in enclosed spaces, is something that we really need to support and push. We've been through a lot of financial challenges. They will continue, I suspect, for some time. The government promised that we would be no worse off through COVID. As with a lot of things the government says, it's what it does that matters. And frankly, there is a shortfall. We do know that COVID is going to cost us money and cost our residents money. And it does mean that the changes we've made and changes which are proposed will have an impact on our residents. I am sorry for that. It's never been our intention to have to willy-nilly pass on costs. Nonetheless, after 10 years of austerity, and actually the size of our council has shrunk by getting on for 25%, it's inevitable that wriggle room has simply gone. I'm grateful that at the last council meeting where the budget setting, there was cross-party support, and I'm grateful for that. And I think we need to remember that. Finally, there's an election coming up soon. And can I say good luck to all candidates? And can I hope that those people who stand, those that deserve it, get what they deserve. So beyond that, thank you, and I'll take questions.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
Thank you, Your Worship. And let me first of all, let me thank the leader of this council for his strong leadership over the time. Not just now, but before, during, and the continued pressure that this council is put under by external sources. I'd like to ask questions of the leader for the benefit of any listener, because I'm getting phone calls just now because of leaflets that are going through the door, suggesting things which to me are not quite accurate. So the best format or the best way of dealing with this is by asking the questions here. And if I may, the first question, of course, is about the budget. Could the leader clarify, please, how the council budget is made up? For example, when we started all of this, the revenue support grant, which is a grant from government, used to be 70%, 30% then collected by our own residents. Is that now changed? And now what is it changed to, please? I'll have a supplementary following that.
Okay.
Thank you.
In its very simple terms, and I'll paraphrase this to some degree, our expenditure budget is about 7 million now. I would suggest that in today's figures, 10 years ago, that would probably be nearer 10. So that's why I'm saying that we've lost, getting off 25%. We are using some reserves, so we're looking for £6.5 million to spend this year. That's then made up of central funding still exists, but it is much more complex. We get about 1.4 million from business, which is 22%. We get a little bit of new homes bonus still. That's still a hangover from previous. We get 242,000 this year from a COVID grant. We get a collection deficit of 173. These things get a little complicated, but the vast majority of our funding, 63%, is made up of council tax. Some years ago, the government announced very clearly that their view was that local people should bear the cost of local services. And they've been going for the last 2 years through a process of fairer funding, which is no closer to being resolved than it was 2 years ago. The simple fact is that, and certainly with the levelling up agenda, if one believes that, it's complicated. Agreeing what levelling up is difficult. Agreeing what funding Oadby and Wigston should have is difficult. The county, for instance, was in the paper the other day saying that it's the lowest funded county council in Britain. And frankly, as the pressure between ourselves and county grows because of funding, that has a knock-on effect on us. We are not well funded. So 22% of our business rate staying with us, bearing in mind we are predominantly a residential borough, is clearly a problem. So I would like to say I expect the funding to get better, but unfortunately I don't. Your supplementary.
Well, thank you, Your Worship, for that succinct answer. I think it's important to remember that we're under these sort of pressures. The supplementary is quite so. I think you've answered it basically, because we've lost the revenue support grant of 70%. And my question was then, I think you've answered this already, is that does this business rate that been given back to us, does it equate to the 70% that we've lost? The answer, I think you've alluded to, but again, I'll ask the question just for clarification, please.
In simple terms, no, the two figures are not the same. As I said, about 10 years ago, our turnover would be, in today's prices, around 10 million. We would have still collected something like 5 million from the residents. Therefore, 5 million was coming from central funds. Now we're getting purely the business rate. And yes, there's some other funding from government. It does get a little complicated around the whole numbers, but in general terms, the vast majority of our expenditure, something like 80%, has got to be spent by either business raised and from either businesses or our council taxpayers.
Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman, your worship.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Lloyd? Sorry, Samuel, I do beg your pardon.
I do have other questions, but I will wait, if you like, till after Councillor Kaufman has asked his questions.
Thank you, Councillor
I've
Lloyd.
got two more questions after that, please.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got two questions I'd like the leader's comments on. One refers to the leaflet that Councillor Lloydell was just referring to. I don't know whether you had a chance to see it and indeed read it, but it compares the council tax that we charge in our borough of Oby and Wigston with some other local authorities. And at the bottom, and of course it points us out as being terrible, reckless spenders and stuff like that. But it also, in very small print at the bottom, says, this doesn't include the parish charge that can be put on top of it. Can you confirm, dear leader, that there is no parish surcharge to go on top of the Oby and Wigston's council tax, and that the bill we send out includes all the other bits, but unlike the other authorities mentioned in this leaflet, there is no parish surcharge to go on top of that? That's my first question.
I can simply, that's absolutely correct. Oby and Wigston does not have parishes. It provides all of the services that the other districts provide, plus all the services the parishes would provide. It's also interesting that each parish is allowed to set its own precept, though they are not capped in any way. And in fact, within a single district or borough, you can have variable charges. It gets even more complicated in Charnwood. Loughborough is not parished, and actually Charnwood Council charges an additional sum for those people living in Loughborough.
So it's like comparing, Your Worship, if I may, it's like comparing apples with oranges.
I think you are correct. It is apples and oranges, and the fact that the small print is so small is tantamount to, in my opinion, potentially misleading and therefore against electoral law.
All right, thank you. My second comment was relating to the letter that we all received a copy of flying the flag and giving us instructions to fly the flag on all buildings or principal buildings or whatever it is. Now, let me make it clear, Your Worship, I'm as proud as any other British person of the Union flag. I very much value the opportunity of seeing the flag flying on special occasions. But I happen to have a family background that comes from a part of Europe that's seeing flag waving in the way that some people have used it, feeling most uncomfortable. Now, I want to see the flag continue to be flown on Her Majesty the Queen's birthday and any other civic and proper occasions. But I honestly feel uncomfortable when the government of the day command the local authority to put it up every day of the week, forgetting the cost of it and forgetting how they seem to have strange priorities. But I get very uncomfortable with nationalism and flag flying in the way that appears to be happening. Every time I watch the television and a government minister on, one has one flag, the other one will have two flags, and somebody else will have three flags. I don't think the Union flag is intended for that. And I get very uncomfortable, very unhappy about that. And I hope somebody around would take some notice that there are people in the community that get very unhappy with nationalism and flag flying. And I don't want our Union flag to be dragged into the political debate. Thank you, Your Worship.
I totally agree with you, Councillor Kaufman. I think it's important that we fly the flag when it matters, and frankly, flying it all the time actually makes it matter less. And I think that is something to be avoided.
Thank you, Councillor. Was Councillor Kevin Lloyd, or did you want to come back?
Sorry, yes, please, if nobody else wants to go before me, but I can carry on if that's okay, Your Worship.
I think, yes, you're okay to carry on.
Carry on, okay. Again, a question with regards to development within the borough. Again, I've had residents ring me with regards to a leaflet that's gone through the door that's quoting 650 more homes in Wixton, as though we've got something wrong. The figure quoted is 650 houses in Wixton, and it's in the public domain. Could the leader clarify where the figures come from and by whom, please? I'll have a supplementary if necessary.
Thank you. In its simplest sense, all local authorities are required to have a local plan. That local plan will set out its housing needs for the period of the local plan. And our housing need up to 2031 is some 2,960 houses. That number is identified several ways. The strategic housing land assessment, there is also the government's standard model. But eventually you end up with a number, and that's your housing need. Within the borough, you then plan for, I think it's 60-40, 60% of all houses should be planned, 40% are what's known as windfall. The 60% planned included the direction for growth in Wixton, and the first tranche of that, which is mostly built, is off Newton Lane, and the second tranche, which runs round from Newton Lane round to the old A50, is the 650 houses which people are talking about. So that is part of the plan, and it's part of a plan which is there to fulfil government requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Floyd.
Miss Supplementary, I'm grateful for that, for the answer, and it's clarified the point from where whom it's coming from. The supplementary it springs to mind of something I've read about, is that if the council do not comply with the government's push to build more and more homes, what will be the consequences for all councils? Please.
I will answer that question now, and then later on when we talk about the agreement on housing with the other districts, I'll come back to it then as well. In its simplest sense, if a council fails to have a local plan, the government is capable and has the power to write one for you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're within the local plan, you need to be showing you've got a 5-year land supply. So you've got planning permissions to show that you can achieve your long-term target, and therefore you've got 5 years worth of supply of houses with a planning permission. And that's important. It's not just land, it's the houses with a planning permission. Once you've done that, if you are not determining applications quick enough, it is possible, and it happened at Blaby a couple of years ago, that planning inspectors came in and actually took the role of your planning, local plans, local development control officers, and actually determined planning applications for them. So in its simplest sense, if we don't achieve it, developers can put applications in which you cannot refuse because you haven't got the 5-year land supply. And if it gets that bad that you're not achieving it, then the government can come in and take over.
Again, Your Worship, I'm grateful. I've just got one final one, if I may, before I don't want to bore people to death. But I think it's important to clarify, going back to the budget or the COVID-19 or the promise from the Home Office, the Home Office or the Community Office or whatever it was, to suggest that 100% of the money spent on COVID, well worth spent, I hasten to add, would be given back to councils. I understand from recent figures, in actual fact, we fall well short of that, and the figure is as low as 71.5%. So we'll never get back 28.5%. So that part, as I think you've mentioned earlier on, is then levied at the local taxpayers.
Yes, I mean, it's very, very difficult to quote accurate figures because, unfortunately, we're still in a pandemic. And although the world is getting better, and we are looking forward to even more freedom on the 12th, it's not there yet, and the actual shakeout of all of the costs will take some time. But by the look of it, we could be £360,000 plus underfunded for COVID. But that is a preliminary figure and not the exact amount, because clearly we're not at the end yet.
Again, Your Worship, I'm grateful for that, and I'll be quiet now for a bit until we move on to the next subject. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydall.
Your Worship, just for the record, John Wells, Senior Environmental Health Officer and COVID Lead, has joined the meeting, although he will have his camera remained off until later on in the meeting. I understand that you can now see the participants.
No, I can't.
No, that's fine. I'll continue to monitor that for you, Your Worship.
Hold on. I've just done something. And they've come up, so I'm with you now.
I'll leave it to your capable hands to call forward members. Thank you.
I don't know who put the hand up first, Councillor Charlesworth or Councillor Linda Broadley?
Councillor Charlesworth, Your Worship.
Councillor Charlesworth then, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if the leader agrees with me on the issue of in-person meetings. I can't remember which junior minister sent the advice out saying that we should all be back in May to in-person meetings. Well, that's fine if you're willing and capable to do so. I don't know whether you agree with me, but I've not had my second jab yet. And until I do get that, I think on May the 20th it's due by, and 2 weeks subsequent to that, I wouldn't attend an in-person meeting. I think it was wrong of the government to say that we all go back. I mean, you know, the old adage that councillors are male, pale and forget the rest. A lot of us have underlying health conditions. Some of us are isolating. To suggest that we can all come back in May was wrong. I'm hoping we don't have any in-person meetings until June the 21st, when the government can come out of Zoom calls.
Thank you, Councillor Charlesworth. Councillor Linda Broadley, please.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Boyce. Sorry.
Whilst I'm basically going to agree with Councillor Charlesworth, I suppose it's only appropriate that I do. I think the problem is this. There's two problems. One is the government itself is operating in one system and expecting us to operate on another. The other one is actually about equality. I do not believe it is my responsibility or any officer's responsibility to check whether each and every councillor is vaccinated or clear or without antibodies or whatever. I believe that all councillors at all times should be treated basically fairly and appropriately. And I think this is actually what they're doing, is they're forgetting that rule. The issue then becomes on, shall we say it's May the 18th rather than May the 11th. On the 18th, do we send out an invite which says all councillors who are vaccinated? What does that mean? So you'd have to have 2 plus 2 weeks, as Michael quite rightly points out. Well, I have no idea how many people, and nor do I wish to know. That is a personal issue for each individual. As equally, there are some of our councillors who are not yet 50. So does that mean they're not allowed? And you're beginning to go round and round in circles. And my view is that like Michael's, that 21st of June, that's when all restrictions are off. That would be the appropriate time to start looking at council meetings. Unfortunately, until the lawyers have been through the High Court and Supreme Court against the government, we have to work on the assumption that the AGM will carry on. Beyond that, we're also in the process of setting the diary, which will ensure that no other meeting will be scheduled until after the 21st of June.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Linda Bordley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry to do this, but I want to go back to the question that Councillor Kevin Lloyd asked about the housing. Because I too also received that leaflet, and I've had 1 or 2 phone calls from people asking me, as Vice Chair of Planning, why we approve these houses going up. And so following on from what Councillor Boyce has said is that it isn't us that decide how many houses to build in the borough. It comes from the government and other agencies that tell us how many houses we have to build. We do have the local plan, but also if a developer comes forward and says, I want to build, I'm going to use their leaflet information, 650 houses, and we turn it down because our residents don't want 650 houses, even though the government and other agencies are telling us we've got to. So we turn it down, and the developer goes to the government inspectorate for planning. What does it cost this borough for turning it down? Is there a knock-on effect to our residents because we have done what they wanted us to do and turned down a planning application for a massive amount of houses?
Thank you. Let me go back to the beginning of the question. We create, as we are required to do in law, a local plan. That local plan is based on evidence. And it's not done to us, it's done with us. And I think that would be a fair point. And later on, we'll start talking about what happens if you cannot fulfill your numbers, which is becoming relevant, and we'll do that later. At the moment, our local plan, which we adopted not last year, the year before, if I remember rightly, indicates we need 2,960 by 2031. I actually chaired 2 public meetings, 5, 6, 7 years ago, about the direction for growth in Wigston. And although I think the original number was slightly less, it's gone up a little bit since then. The direction for growth is being delivered where we're asked for. And so actually refusing it is nonsensical because it's actually our plan that that's where they should go. On the general point about planning appeals, which I'll deal with it as general rather than specific. I'll give 2 examples. I used to live in a place called Jordan Avenue in South Wigston. And at the end of Jordan Avenue, where it butts onto Florence Avenue, there was a very large garden, slightly out of character for the rest of the houses, a large garden. And somebody wanted to put a 1-bedroom house onto the end of that terrace. The committee turned it down. And it went to appeal. The result was that after that appeal, which of course was granted, the contribution that all 1-bedroom houses made to public open space was removed. So there was you are always making a gamble by going to appeal. The second one would be on a large application. there is something called a Section 106 agreement where you negotiate a significant developer contribution. The 650 houses includes a community centre. Well, it includes lots of community type infrastructure, houses, shops, and so on in the middle of the application. It also includes things like contribution, and I think this one actually includes a new school. And that's the point. If you refuse it, you may well lose your Section 106 agreement. The answer, if I was a resident, and if I'm talking to a resident, what I would always say, those 650 houses are going to be built. Our job and their job is to make sure that they're built in the most sustainable and positive way possible, and that the residents get the most out of the Section 106 agreement as possible.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kevin Lloydell, please.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Linda. Sorry.
Can I come back on that?
Certainly can. Sorry, I do apologise.
That's okay. So basically what you're saying is that we cannot really turn down, because it would affect benefits to our residents that the 106 monies would bring in. But also the fact that I know that there's a, whether it's green or white, I don't know, where it's going to, the government want to give developers more powers to be able to build more or less where they like. What effect will that have on our borough? And that's me done then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I slightly park the question till later? In its simplest sense, the 650 is in our local plan, has been there for a long time, and as turning it down is nonsensical. You don't put something in your plan and then turn it down, because it's our plan. However, the other issues about where the world is leading to now, I'd rather deal with later, because they make more sense in the later conversation, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Kevin Lloydell.
I do apologise. I've one more question, which I forgot. I think it's important again, because phone calls with literature going out in a way that may mislead our residents, and it's regarding the green waste and the increase. I've just put down, does really agree with that the council have a proactive and have been proactive in providing first-class green waste service over a 12-month period, as opposed to our neighbours who charge more for their green waste and collection over a shorter period. And again, if I may, our neighbours next door who charge a lot more than ours over a shorter period, but is it a sign of desperation when one member of a local authority next door, it's the national press, the local radio, with regards to, if you want to buy a present for Mother's Day, subscribe to their green waste. Now, I'm not criticising that part of it, but it just show the desperation of local authorities in trying to make their budgets match or become a balanced budget. And in this particular case, of course, they're increasing other charges at the same time. But I'd like to think that I'm quite proud of the fact that we operate a green waste over a 12-month period, and it's value for money. Thank you. I won't have any more questions.
I think you're correct, Councillor Lloydell, that in its simplest sense, local authorities are required by law to balance the books. You can bring money and put money into reserves, but nonetheless, you have to balance the books. We are under significant pressure to balance the books. There's no question of that, and nor would I ever deny that. Green waste, whilst I think is something that is positive and should be carried out is not a statutory service, and therefore it needs to be paid for. Now, roughly 50% of the borough actually uses the Greenway service, and therefore that 50% of the borough needs to pay for its cost. And unfortunately, as we're under greater and greater pressure, there's less and less money to go around, and that it's only appropriate to charge what the service costs, and therefore the services had to go up. And I think it still offers good value for money, and it's competitive within the within the local area, which is, putting it simply, I think all you can ever achieve.
Thank you. Are you happy with that?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Bill Bolter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, very briefly, it's been going on quite a long while now. Yes, the Green Waste is a service which you don't have to take up. It's a voluntary service. You can't take it up or not. And ours is midpoint cost-wise with all the districts in the county. So I'm quite happy to defend that rise in that service, because before it was subsidised by the residents. Now it's a true cost of the service. The real question is going back to the budgets and budget setting. We've had a history in this borough since we took control of strong financial management, and we still have. And when COVID hit, beginning part of the year, the government said, we will fund you all it costs you to run the service for COVID. And we've heard tonight that is not true. And they've had to find extra money to plug that gap. And the leader says somewhere in the region of £360,000. Now, any business faced with that, and we are a business, suddenly finds out you're not going to get the money you thought you're going to get, the money you were promised. We've now got a problem. We've got to find this extra money, and we've got to find it quickly to produce a balanced budget. And that's what we've done. So, you know, if any blame goes to anywhere, it's the central government by not funding us fully to what they said they would do in the beginning. I hope the leader agrees with me that that's a very misleading statement, that they're going to fund us completely and then fund us by something like 71% of the money and expect us to find the extra at very short notice. Thank you, Leader.
If I could work out what the question was, I'd be happy to answer it. However, what I will say is I'm not so much in defence of the government, more as an explanation of the situation. This time a year ago, to say we had to spend what was required on COVID, we would get the money back, I think in many ways is the simplistic and correct thing to say. The difficulty is that it's when you work out not just what you've spent, but also what you've lost, that it becomes frightfully complicated. And to be honest, that's why the time to know whether we've been shortchanged or to what extent we've been shortchanged is probably in another year's time, because at that point we'll know what normality is, and therefore what the change from normality 15 months ago it was to normality in 15 months' time. And that's our biggest problem. It's understanding what one normality is, what another normality is, and what the difference has been, and therefore what adjustments we have to make. Yes, there has been underfunding. There's no question of that. Yes, there have been promises which have not been completely delivered. Yes, that's true. But our big problem is we've moved from one certainty to another certainty, and that means we have to make changes. And until we get to the second certainty, we're not sure what those changes are.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. There are no other hands raised. So can I now move on to agenda item 10, which is the corporate plan 2019 to 2024. And this is a 2021 to 22 update. Mrs. Court, I believe you're introducing this item, is that right? Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I am.
Thank you.
Attached to the report is the proposed annual update to the Council's 5-year corporate plan. We are now entering its 3rd year. Just to remind you, the three overarching objectives of the plan remain the same throughout the life of the plan, and that's building, protecting and empowering communities, growing the borough economically and providing excellent services. But how we deliver under those objectives are reviewed each year. As projects are completed, we move into the next phase, such as with regeneration projects, and as well as setting new goals. Within the plan, there is a summary under each objective of how we performed during the last year, which for 2021, despite the pandemic, we continued to deliver on major goals, such as achieving the nationally recognised Customer Service Excellence Award, increasing our volunteer base significantly, through successful bids, securing significant funding for our major economic redevelopment projects, and successfully tackling ASB. As the forward, this year's review of the plan highlights, under our objectives, the focus has to be continuing to deal with the pandemic. And that is, as we emerge out of lockdown in the months ahead, supporting and playing a vital part in the safe opening up of our town centres, our leisure centres, and our nighttime economy. And it's also that the focus is about the longer term recovery strategy, and that is particularly to support our communities with a focus on health, community engagement and support, and the viability of our businesses to build back better, to provide employment opportunities for the young, and continuing to deliver funding grants where available. Progress throughout the year will be reported to Service Delivery Committee. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Samir Hack, please.
Your Worship, and just a couple of quick questions, if I may. On page 11, Mrs. Court, we've got KPI BPE5 to improve the amount of material recycling, and the rate is above 40%. I just wanted to know, I noticed on my visit to the recycling centre run by the county, a lot of the rubbish was going to landfill, and they used to display a recycling rate on the board there, which they have taken it off. Has our recycling rate seen a dip during the pandemic as well, and has the target gone up or remained the same? Could you give me a couple of any figures regarding that? And I have another question, if I can come back.
Mrs. Court, do you want to answer the first part, or would you like Councillor Hack to ask both questions?
If we answer the first part, and I think Avril Lennox is probably best placed to answer that question.
Yeah, the recycling rates have varied throughout COVID. In the last Service Delivery Committee, the results were shown within the report, and they do go up and down, but we do tend to compare them year on year. I haven't got those figures in front of me. Councillor Hack, could you just repeat the other part of that question one? I didn't quite hear it.
I just wanted to know whether our target for above 40%, has that gone up from last year, or it remained the same?
I think the target is around 44.3%.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to ask another question on page 13. Mrs. Court, improve air quality in the borough. Do we actually implement any measures? And the reason I ask this question, because during the pandemic, because of lots of people using less and less cars, the air quality had improved. And I know in Wixton Town Centre, the air quality has been particularly bad over the last few years. Do we actually do or take any measures to reduce the car pollution to improve the air quality in our town centres?
Mr. Gill, are you able to answer that one?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Hack. The Borough Council works closely with the County Council, and we have submitted, or we submit every year, an air quality monitoring report through to DEFRA, and each year that report says that we're within the tolerances. The intention is that as soon as we get the Wi-Fi up and running in South Wigston and Wigston and the new air monitoring stations, we'll be able to do real-time monitoring of the air quality, and that will be fed through into the county health boards and to their air monitoring groups, and then they will determine a course of mitigation if it's necessary.
Thank you.
Your Worship, just for the record, Laurie Faulkner of the Independent Remuneration Panel has now joined the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy with that, Councillor Hack?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Although I would have liked to know if we are actually actively taking any measure to reduce car pollution.
Mr. Gill, do you have a reply?
Thank you, Your Worship. As it currently stands, we've not declared an air quality management area because that is dependent upon other authorities. As you appreciate, we work closely with the city, and there's also issues around the county who are responsible for the major trunk roads. It would never be a case that this authority would arbitrarily decide to take measures. Those measures would have to be in consultation with our partners.
Thank you. Okay with that, Councillor Hack?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Joshi, please.
Thank you, Chair and Honour. I think Councillor Hack actually asked the same question I wanted to ask. What was the recycling rate currently? So that's in part answered one of my first questions. The corporate plan is very ambitious, which is good. But I think I would like to see on the corporate plan responsibilities for the various KPIs and assigning them to various people who need to be responsible for those. So that when we come to look at whether these have been met on milestones and the monthlies and the benchmarks, have they been met? And if they haven't, can we have a specific accountability of why that's not being met? If that was possible to be added on, I don't know. It's part of project management plan. You always have some sort of an assignment to an accountable person. So if that can be included, I think that would be good. As we're going forward, we don't have a lot of money to spend. So I think a lot of this is going to depend on what income we're able to generate through various means. Our budget showed that we're really low on money. So again, it's the plan itself is great on paper, but we need to have more accountability if that's possible.
Thank you, Councillor Joshi. Who would like to reply to Councillor Joshi?
I will, Your Worship. And that accountability will be through the Service Delivery Committee, where the individual heads of service or their managers will give reported updates on progress throughout the year.
Thank you, Mrs. Cook. Are you okay with that, Councillor Joshi?
I actually wanted to see it physically done on paper rather than, I know it goes to service delivery. I don't sit on service delivery, but I will read the papers. But I think it would be just useful to have, like you've done it on a table format. It would be good to have an idea of who specifically is responsible, if that can be done.
Okay, we'll look into that.
Thank you.
But I think it is, just off the top of my head, I think it is assigned to a department when it reports to service delivery.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kevin Lloydell, please.
Thank you, Worship. Again, on page 13, just to clarify the improve or the air quality in the borough, what we used to get, and we should still get it, is a map identify where the hotspots are. There used to be one in Oadby, one in Wixton. I can't remember where the third one was. But I think it's important that sort of detail is presented at a particular committee, so we can see or collect the evidence as to whether or not we need to put pressure on whoever the agencies are. In one area, in my area, Elston Lane, there was not a spot there. We put pressure on county. Sadly, what they did is move the monitoring equipment to get a lower reading, but because we still use that evidence, and we got a slight alteration to that junction to try and ease it. So it's important that we're able to get that. And could we have updates going to the relevant committee? I think it would be the service committee, so that we can see where those hotspots are. Then we can start to challenge what we can and can't do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lloyd-Hall. I think, can we have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move it.
Sorry, who was that?
Councillor Boyce.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Can I have a seconder, please?
I can second that.
Thank you. So we will go to a recorded style vote, but before we do, Mr. Ball wishes to clarify something. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Kozlowski, are you still in the room, or is your camera just tilted? There we go. There she is. She is still there. Sorry, Your Worship, and Mr. Tucker recorded for style vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
4.
Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Bentley.
4.
Councillor Bolter.
4.
Councillor Boyce.
4.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
4.
Councillor Carter.
4.
Councillor Charlesworth.
4.
Councillor Dar.
4.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
4.
Councillor Gamble.
4.
Councillor Hack.
4.
Councillor Joshi.
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Kozlowski.
4.
Councillor David Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Sharon Morris.
4.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just tally that up. I think that's 18 votes for and 1 against.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. We'll now move to agenda item 11, review of health and safety 2019 to 21. Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is the 4th annual report in respect of health and safety at the council, albeit that this year it is reporting on 2 years, given that all council meetings last year were cancelled. The report includes appropriate health and safety information on the council's activities and performance, and it demonstrates the commitment to effective health and safety and risk management. Appendix 1 deals with matters relating to incidents that have occurred, so we have an introduction and overview. It sets out how health and safety is managed by the council through elected members, the chief executive and the senior leadership team, and it provides stats in respect of regulatory interventions, auditing activity and accident statistics. If you're looking at the accident statistics, it sets out the accidents in 2019-21 were mainly slip, strips and falls, both at Bushlow House and the Customer Services Centre, and there was some activity outside from the operations team when they were carrying out waste management or grounds maintenance work. For comparison, in 2018-19, the majority of accidents were due to the use of plastic sacks for waste collection. The report sets out the accident investigations that have been completed and near misses, and it also reports that there was 1 reportable accident to the HSE in 2019-21. The second part of the report contains the detail in respect of the health and safety policy going forward, and that policy is approved by the leader and the chief executive. Again, it's self-explanatory, but it sets out how the council intends to manage health and safety going forward. I'm happy to take any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Let me just see if there are any hands raised. I can't see any hands raised, Mr. Gill. So can I have a move? Have the item moved, please?
I will.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder, please?
I'll second it.
Thank you. So that the recommendation has been moved, and we will now go to a recorded style vote. Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
For.
Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Charlesworth.
For.
Councillor Dar.
For.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
For.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Hack.
For.
Councillor Joshi.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Kozlowski.
For.
Councillor David Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
I'll abstain on this occasion.
Thank you. And Councillor Sharon Morris.
For.
Thank you, Worship. So that's 18 votes in favour, 1 abstention.
Thank you. Next item, agenda 12, scheme of members' allowances 2021 to 2022. Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you, Your Worships. If you can just slightly bear with me, my IT has just crashed and I can't get the report. So if you could put it on screen for me, please, Mr. Ball. So this is the report of the Independent Remuneration Panel, and the recommendation that is set out in front of you is that the Council adopts the scheme of members' allowances for 2021-22 as recommended by the IRP. If you could go down, please. So the IRP are set up under the members' allowances regulations, and Council is required to have regard to their recommendations as expressed in their report. Can we go down further, please, into the body of the report? The recommendations are set out at the start of the report, and that is that the basic allowance remains at a level of 4,750 per annum. The SRAs are set out below in the column, and that the current attendance allowance detailed in Schedule 1 of the current members' allowance scheme to be discontinued. Those are the hourly rates which are set out in the current scheme. Below that, there is a rationale of how the members reach their conclusions and the work that they've undertaken. You will see from the process of review that members have used a number of comparator councils. You'll notice that those comparator councils have changed this year from previous years because of the fact that a number of them have either been absorbed into unitary authorities such as Christchurch, and others such as Melton have become executive councils, and therefore the basis on which their allowances are calculated is slightly different to where we are at Oadby and Wigston. The report is fairly clear and set out. Mr. Faulkner, the chair of the IRP, is in attendance this evening if members have got any questions. If I pass back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Faulkner, please? Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I thank the panel for its diligence and hard work? It clearly isn't an easy job because in the end, we're all affected by their outcome. But I think they've made some changes which I can understand and I can't fault. So I will happily, if that's the right word, move the report that the scheme is adopted. Can I make one slight question, not necessarily for this year, but for at some point going forward? It would be appropriate, I think, if possibly it may take a couple of years to sort out, that we actually look at adopting a scheme which runs rather than is reviewed every year, is some automatic link to inflation. May well be a useful thought, which can be looked at in the coming years. But beyond that, I move the report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder, please?
I can second that, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Lydall. Mr. Faulkner, do you have anything you wish to add?
No, I don't think so. As Councillor Boyce said, it's a matter of tidying up a few loose ends, but certainly we'll certainly look into the possibility of linking it to inflation in future years, if that's something you'd like us to do.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us this evening, Mr. Faulkner. So the motion has been moved by Councillor Boyce and seconded by Councillor Kevin Lydall. So we will now go to a recorded style vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hack. I'm sorry. Councillor Hack?
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Oh, your hand's up, Councillor Hack.
Sorry.
It's all right. I thought I'd missed you out. I do apologise. We will now go to a recorded style vote. Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
For.
I'm sorry, Your Worship. I just had it brought to my attention that at 8:05 this evening, somebody showed inadvertently some exempt papers on the screen. It's somebody watching in has just told me that. So I just thought I'd draw it to your attention. Thank you.
Councillor Kaufman, did the informant identify which member disclosed?
No, but I just have had a picture of it sent to me. It's nothing that shows anything up, but it's just taking your point further, the difficulty of something being on the back page.
Mr. Gill, do you want to comment?
Thank you. I mean, if Councillor Kaufman is saying that there was nothing visible other than it was an exempt paper and no detail, I think we just proceed as we are at the moment.
Councillor Boyce, I've got his hand raised, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you. Mr. Gill, can you confirm that even though an item is exempt, the front line, the headline of it is always included in the agenda papers, and that is a standard way of operating?
Yes, Councillor Boyce. In fact, everything contained within the exempt papers is covered by the exemption. In some authorities, they do it by having a different colour. So you may have a pink paper, which it means that it's totally exempt. So members have been asked to be careful about moving documents in front of the camera. And all I can do is reiterate that. It would appear that at this stage, the only thing that was shown, according to Councillor Kaufman, was the headline of the exempt paper. So I think we proceed as we are, but can I just reiterate with members that they need to make sure papers are out of view of the camera?
Yeah, but the point I'm making, Mr. Gill, is that on the council agenda paper, exempt items are still on the front page, and all that they say, all they have is an introduction to what the content is, but not the content.
That's correct. We are required to publish notification that we are going to consider the matter, and there we have the one line of the proposed commercial car park charge, which Mr. Ball is showing, but anything other than that is completely exempt.
Thank you. You finished, Mr. Councillor Boyce, do you want to come back? No.
No, Your Worship, I simply wanted to clarify that the front page, the front sheet was in accordance with normality, and therefore that part is not exempt. It's the content which is exempt.
Thank you. Mr. Tucker, do you want to go back to taking the recorded vote, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
For.
Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Charlesworth.
For.
Councillor Dar.
For.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
For.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Hack.
For.
Councillor Joshi.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Kozlowski.
For.
Councillor David Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Sharon Morris.
For.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. So that being the case, we'll now move on to agenda item 13. Approval of Public Space Protection Order, Regulation of Dogs 2021. Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this is a recommendation for the renewal of the PSPO in respect of dogs and regulation thereof. The Obion Wilkinson's Dogs Fouling of Land Act Designation Order 2004 and the various bylaws that related to it were repealed when the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act came into force in 2014. There's a requirement that where a PSPO is put into place, then it has to be renewed for every 3 years. The report sets out the consultation that has been undertaken, which was during a 10-week period, and that was through social media and direct contact with relevant authorities and interested parties, and it sets out the responses, of which there were two, one from the police who were aware that the PSPO was in existence, but they hadn't enforced against it, and the second one was the response from the Kennel Club, and that response is set out in full as Appendix 1 of the report. The PSPO sets out various measures for the control of fouling, dogs on leads by direction, keeping of dogs on leads, exclusion of dogs, and means to pick up. And it also sets out the enforcement process, which currently is undertaken by Animal Care Services Limited, who operate within the borough, monitoring the parks and other places where dogs are to be found. The report did go to the Licensing and Regulatory Committee, and they recommended approval for council. So that's the content of the report, Your Worship. If any members have any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Sharon Morris, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I welcome this report. I am a dog owner, always been a dog owner, but I've always been a responsible dog owner. Herrick Way and Fostongate on the Harcourt have open spaces. The one on Herrick Way and one of them on Fostongate has a large expanse of land right next to the road, and neither of these have been included, and yet I can see the Herrick Way one from my kitchen window, and I have seen on numerous occasions dogs run into the road, never as yet thankfully causing an accident, but it's there waiting to happen. I'm just wondering why these pieces of land haven't been considered. There are other pieces of land that I know are in the middle of housing developments that have been. I just wondered what the reason was and whether we should be able to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. It very much depends on the ownership of the land in question. What we are mainly concerned with is parks and open spaces as opposed to small areas within housing estates. We certainly can have a look at it, but for all members, if they have concerns about dog fouling in their area, then if they please contact Environmental Health Services, the Animal Aid Limited patrol for 15 hours per week within the borough, and what we can do is direct them to places of concern if we're informed by members that it's necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Gill.
May I come back, Your Worship?
Certainly, Councillor Morris.
Thank you. I'm more concerned about dogs being allowed off their leashes in these areas because they run into the road. The dog fouling isn't too bad in this area. It's more dogs off leashes that concerns me. And 2 of the 3 spaces I've mentioned are maintained by ourselves and in our ownership.
There is no automatic ban on dogs being off the leash. The only time that it would cause an issue is if they've been directed by an officer to put the dog on a leash and they haven't done so. But we can certainly have a look at it going forward if you think there's an issue there.
I think it's a safety issue.
I'll take that back to the officers then, Councillor Morris. Thank you. Thank you, Your
Thank you.
Worship.
Happy, Councillor Morris?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Broadley, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to propose that we accept the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Broadley.
I'll second that.
Sorry,
Worship, I'll second that.
Thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship, to interject. I believe Councillor Bentley had his hand raised.
That's what I was going to call him. Yeah.
If members, if they wish to move in second, could they pop up their hands virtually so they don't cut across other members?
that's
Is that correct, Councillor Bentley, through you, Your Worship?
Thank you. Councillor Bentley, is that what you were going to do?
I was actually, Your Worship, but I've also got a few comments to make if I can.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley, carry on.
I'm quite happy with this report. I believe that we do need this sort of thing in place. I do find that most dog owners are very responsible people. Having 2 dogs of my own, which we regularly walk, more my wife than myself, because I go to work. We find that most dog owners are very responsible and carry the necessary equipment to clean up after their dogs. But I do believe one of the concerns of the Kennel Club was for those responsible owners who do clean up after their dogs. If they actually run out of equipment to do that, are we going to still prosecute them or fine them if they are found to not have the suitable means of cleaning up after their dogs, even though they've done it previously during the same walk? Also, I note that the protection orders, including areas where the dog has to be kept on a lead. We quite regularly take our dogs up to Brox Hill, but I can't recall very many signs up there saying that the dog has to be on a lead in that red marked out area. Mr. Gill just said that dogs don't necessarily have to be on a lead unless they're ordered to be on a lead, but I thought the red line protection areas were they had to be on a lead. So are the relevant signs going to be in place to make sure that people can comply with it and know that they need to comply with it? The only place I've ever really seen them is on the cemetery gates.
Mr. Gill, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just briefly looking at the order. In terms of the issue with not having a means to clear up after a dog, all things are discretionary, Councillor Bentley, and they're, it's down to the officer in the case to determine whether or not it is a genuine fact that somebody has used all their poo bags up, for want of a phrase, and whether or not it's deliberate, and there is a discretion. Other than that, there's not much more I can say. That in terms of the dogs on leads, I'm just running through the order, and so there are certain areas where you must keep a dog on a lead, and there's certain areas where you can only do it under direction of an officer. Can I come back to you outside of the meeting, Councillor Bentley, and clarify exactly where they are? In terms of signage, we did install a lot of signage when this order first came in 3 years ago. We are aware that some of the signage has been removed or it's been damaged, certainly around Willow Park, and we will be looking at putting it back in. And we will also be doing a review of the whole of the area just to see what's happened and whether or not we need to install further signage to make it clearer.
Thank you. Could I just ask one more question, Your Worship?
Certainly can, Councillor Bentley.
You said that we have people going round carrying out checks and possible enforcement. Do we have any data on any enforcement action that was taken?
There is one mention in the report, I believe, Councillor Bentley, through you, Your Worship, where we've issued at least one fixed penalty notice for somebody that has failed to comply. The main focus on the patrols is actually on education, because what we're trying to do is make sure that through time people do make sure that their animals behave and that they do clean up after them. We get a regular report back from the contractor every week, which sets out where they've been and what they've done and who they've spoken to, and we can make that available if you'd like to see that.
Yes, thank you. That would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Happy, Councillor Bentley?
Yes, that's fine. That's fine. That's lovely.
Thank you. There are no more hands up, so we'll now, agenda item 13 has been moved by Councillor Linda Broadley and seconded by Councillor Bentley. So we'll now go to a recorded style vote. Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
For.
Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Charlesworth.
As I missed part of the presentation, I won't vote.
Thank you, Councillor Charlesworth.
Councillor Dar.
For.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
For.
Councillor Gamble.
As I missed the section, I will not vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gamble.
Councillor Hack.
For.
Councillor Joshi.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Kozlowski.
For.
Councillor David Lloydell.
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydell.
For.
Councillor Sharon Morris.
For.
Thank you, Your Worship. So that's 17 votes in favour.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. We now move on to agenda item 14, adoption of public realm strategy supplementary planning document 2021. Mr. Thorpe, please. I think you're going to introduce this.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I will do. This report seeks approval to adopt the Public Realm Strategy Supplementary Planning document. A period of public consultation has taken place on the document, and all comments have been considered as set out in the Statement of Consultation, Appendix 2. Where appropriate, amendments have been made to the supplementary planning document arising from the comments that we have received. The version of the supplementary planning document to be adopted is contained in the report at Appendix 1. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. I'll just check and see if there are any hands raised. Yes, Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Move.
Thank you. Councillor David Carter, please.
I would like to second this report and simply make the comment. I think the original report, the original draft that came out was an excellent draft, but was enhanced by the many comments that were made by both members and residents. And so we've ended up with a very excellent document, which I'm very happy to second. But I'd also want to just draw attention to the fact of, as is in the report, the number of comments that were received from residents and the quality of those reports. And I think that is encouraging that our residents have such a keen interest in our public realm, and that they take, to quote the phrase, a pride in their borough. So I'm happy to second this report.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Hack, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, on page 70, the 4th paragraph, is there a mistake with the date regarding the consultation, or am I going a bit crazy? Should that say February 2021?
That's it, should do. My apologies.
Thank you.
Being pedantic.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. You okay, Councillor Hack? Is that all right?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just check and see if there are any more hands raised. No, there are no more hands raised. In that case, the item was moved by Councillor Boyce and seconded by Councillor Carter. So again, we'll go to a recorded style vote. Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
For.
Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Charlesworth.
For.
Councillor Dar.
For.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
For.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Hack.
For.
Councillor Joshi.
For.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
For.
Councillor Kozlowski.
For.
Councillor David Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
For.
Councillor Sharon Morris.
For.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. That being the case, we'll now move on to agenda item 15. Leicester and Leicestershire Statement of Common Ground relating to housing and employment land needs, March 2021. Mr. Thorpe again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. For some time now, the Leicester and Leicestershire authorities have kept up to date the Statement of Common Ground. This is particularly important to support councils where they reach a public examination stage of their local plan preparation. This report relates to the most recent update of the document, which is required to support Charnwood's local plan. The Statement of Common Ground is a factual document that sets out the current state of affairs and covers housing and employment need and supply, and the process by which apportionment of any housing and employment unmet need will occur. The Statement of Common Ground sets out not only, the Statement of Common Ground sets out that the only authority to declare and quantify with evidence an unmet need is Leicester City. It sets out that the authorities remain committed to cooperating on strategic cross-boundary matters, including agreeing the redistribution of any unmet need. It is recommended that approval is given for the Borough Council to sign the Leicester and Leicestershire Statement of Common Ground, which is attached to Appendix 1 to the report. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Thorpe. Just see if there are any hands raised. Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to go back to what was said earlier, because there was effectively a question which relates to the fact that we have to work in cooperation with our other councils in the county and the city. And also it relates to, I suppose, the risk assessment against this, where we are in terms of planning and in terms of housing numbers. The government's view is quite straightforward. It's basically saying build to build to build, and when you're not sure what to do, build, which is great. That's straightforward. At least that's honest and straightforward. They then did an algorithm as to how to distribute these houses, and you may recall there was quite a furore in the counties districts, which said, you know, you're putting all these houses onto us, you're not being fair. So the government's view was, okay, we're not being fair. What we're going to do is we're going to take those off, and we're going to put 35% on the 20 biggest cities in England, in Britain, whatever, in England, I think it is. But anyways, we are covered. One of them is Leicester. They've put 35% on Leicester's need. The problem is that Leicester's running out of space. And as Leicester runs out of space, it then creates what's known as unmet need. An unmet need is then covered by the duty to cooperate, by the issue we have got in front of us today. Once that policy becomes genuine government policy, the unmet need the city was going to have in 5 years' time becomes today. In fact, it becomes yesterday. It's that bad. Because it doesn't matter what the numbers are, they're in the report. The numbers will go through the roof for the city cannot meet its need. Those numbers then need to move into the county. The effect on us becomes quite odd. In many ways, we are going to have an unmet need 5, 6, 7 years' time anyway, because we do not have the infrastructure to support any more houses. We have maybe a little bit of land, but basically no infrastructure. The county's view of our infrastructure is simple. If you have gridlock, more houses do not make the gridlock any worse. Therefore, it's not a problem, which is not terribly helpful. The attempt in the strategic growth plan was to look at the fact that southeast and east of the city was going to expand and is going to expand, and there needs to be appropriate infrastructure to go with it. And at some point, that strategic growth plan is becoming more and more relevant now, rather than by 2050, which was when it originally envisaged. So in terms of housing, I'm not terribly hopeful, shall I say, for the borough. I don't think we will be any more badly affected than we would have been anyway, but I do feel that we are likely to have more houses. I think it puts more pressure on us to develop within the town centres to try and protect as much green space as possible. But I suspect that one of the big issues for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years for this council is going to be housing and housing numbers. But beyond that, the report is absolutely fine. I move the report, and that was simply for background.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Hack, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question has partly been answered. I was going to ask whether the Leicester City's unmet housing need has an impact on us as the neighbouring borough.
Thank you, Councillor Hack. Councillor Dean Gamble, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Would the leader of the council agree with me that the government white paper, green paper, whatever paper it is on future planning law would be catastrophic to this council and tear up our local plan, which could mean far more housing than we have envisaged for the future? Thank you.
I go back to what I said a moment ago, which is a well-planned growth of housing should be welcome, not resisted. The problem I think we're going to have is, unless all of the districts, not just ourselves, but Harborough, Melton, Hinckley, Blaby, on this side of town, at this side of the city, unless we have some form of agreement to lobby for and then put the infrastructure in place, any development southeast and east of the city will add to what is simply gridlock. And I do accept that. And I do accept that that is a problem, and which is why I very much was part of the move to at least look at a strategic growth plan to try and work out where we were going to go in the future. The alternative is slightly odd. It's that actually, because there's no infrastructure to the east and southeast of the city, you could build to the west, and you end up with a city and county which has all the growth either side of the M1, which I think is quite nonsensical. But that is where a lot of pressure is at the moment. So I think this is something that's going to run and become a problem as we go forward. The other issue is that Blaby, and this is understandable from Blaby's point of view, but it has a knock-on effect on us. Blaby have been working on the assumption that there is a 20A junction on the M1 somewhere near Whetstone. The problem for the borough's point of view, unless you have the strategic highway with that junction, you end up delivering more cars and more lorries onto the existing road structure, which simply, it's not that it won't cope, it would just become more and more gridlocked, and therefore the borough becomes less and less easy to travel within. So I'm not hopeful, but I think at least the right conversations are being had, although maybe not to the right conclusion.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Campbell, do you want to come back at all?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Lloydell, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just looking at page 247, which is the Right Honourable Christopher Peach MP, Minister for State and Housing, and looking at the paragraphs and understanding where the pressure's coming from all districts, not just this one. When you look at the second or third paragraph, it talks about the ambition of over 300,000 homes per year by the mid-2020s. 1 million homes over a parliament, increasing the number of up-to-date local plans across England, increasing the number of houses. As it's already been alluded to, I find it difficult to, again, where do you feel that the pressure is coming from to build more houses? The letter speaks for itself. It's just a comment, and I find it difficult to understand the comment that says better and greener homes in the right places. Now, there's a challenge. Having seen some of the what they're building these days, as somebody alluded to, in the city, they were building slum houses or slum flats and that sort of thing. So, for me, it lends itself to a challenge to make sure that, yes, indeed, we are going to build greener homes and in the right places, and the demand is coming from the government rather than individual councils and districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lloydell. Mr. Thorpe, do you want to come back to that?
No, I think Councillor Lloydell was just making a comment there, so I don't have anything to add, Your Worship.
Councillor Allen, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is regards to 106 money. Who's going to retain control over that? And also, in terms of building houses, I know building houses, you know, we've got that pressure to build more houses, but also we're probably going to expand horizontally, but is there also a pressure to expand vertically as well? Are we going to have more high-rise buildings in the local area to compensate for the increase in demand? Is there any restriction on that?
Your worship, if I may, on that. First thing, we'll deal with the verticality issue. We're already talking about 3, 4, 5 stories in the town centres, and I think that's only right. I wouldn't want particularly to go to a massive 50-story development anywhere in the borough, because I think that would be completely out of keeping. However, I think, yes, we will end up with, I suspect, 4 and 5 stories in the borough, and certainly in the town centres. And I think that's right. And I think there is pressure on the city to also go vertical. Section 106 is a complex issue, always complex, because there are lots and lots of lawyers involved, and lawyers basically spend most of their time disagreeing and very little of their time actually working anything out. Okay. Section 106 is, the reason for them is because any development brings with it issues. And the idea of the Section 106 is that that is the way of resolving the issues the development brings. And you'll also hear sometimes this thing called CIL, which is Community Infrastructure Levy, which is another way of doing 106 agreements. But the point about the CIL is it includes all the rules. And the rules are, in its simplest sense, if you have a development in Oadby, the knock-on effect is in Oadby, therefore you spend the 106 money in Oadby. It isn't that simple, but that's the essence. The problem is that we are the statutory responsible body because we give the planning permission, and the Section 106 contract sits with us and the agreement sits with us. However, when you look at roads, you look at schools, you can look at police, you can look at fire, you can look at education, they all sit with other people. The county at the moment are trying to force on us that we underwrite all Section 106 agreements. That we've already had legal advice is almost certainly illegal, or at least unlawful. So there is some pressure there, but the answer to the question is that ultimately we are responsible for agreeing the Section 106, but on many occasions other people actually deliver the 106, and there then becomes another problem, which is 106 can be subject to affordability. So if you have by the way, we have a 106 agreement, a planning obligation that you have to build a certain number of affordable homes within certain places. So the developers often try and either reduce the Section 106 money or the affordability element of a housing development, because basically 4-bedroom houses, which all look like the same, only turned at different angles, actually make them the most money. So there is always a lot of pressure on Section 106 from developers, and that will no doubt continue. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Allen, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you very much for that, Councillor Boyce. Just one other, just a little thing, and that is that, you know, a lot of the sort of anxiety is around school places and catering for children who or families that come into the borough for their children to have school places. But nowadays, a lot of colleges, schools have become academies. And I don't know whether or not these academies sit with the county's authority anymore in terms of allocating school places and expanding. Does the county do anything with that, or is it more left with the academies as a private entity, and do we have to support them more directly as a borough?
That's a really good question, so Adrian can answer it.
I have to say, I don't understand how education works to that degree to be able to answer that question. The key thing from a Section 106 point of view is to ensure that we engage with the county council to ensure that there's a sufficient amount of school places available in the borough for people that are moving into the area to be able to take up. And that's what we do. And by example, I can reference the Wixton Direction for Growth that we were talking about earlier, where in total there will be about 1,000 new homes provided there. And that therefore enables us to include a Section 106 agreement that requires the developer to provide the land for a new school to be built on.
But may I say maybe, Adrian, that the schools could potentially bid for 106 money directly, becoming, as they are academies that sit outside the local authority, and maybe they might be able to expand their sites, etc. Maybe that might is that potentially a way of working with us rather than the county in developing maybe their schools and bidding for 106 money. Could it happen like that?
I think I would need to look into that and get back to you on that point, but certainly my understanding is that the county council is still the local education authority and they are the stakeholder that we need to consult with on planning applications and Section 106 agreement.
I would also point out that my guess would be, and let's take it away from this county and this borough. If you were to go from Section 106 with a party which is not a statutory consultee, I suspect you may end up being JR'd by the county as well as by the developer. I think it's an area that is fraught with difficulties. So I think we have to stick with working with the county, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Allen, you want to come back?
No, thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Geoffrey Kaufman, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I've got a point I want to make about general housing, but can I be of some help to Councillor Allen? The local authority, Leicestershire County Council, are responsible for providing school places in the borough and school places in Leicester. And they have the responsibility of providing a school place for every child in the borough. But they're not helped by this turn to academies, which was a Tory flagship design. And what has happened is school places in Oadby are like Wild West. And you have schools that are able to draw whatever catchment areas they like. We have one school, Beecham College in Oadby, that has a catchment area, as far as I understand, goes from London Road Station up into Great Glen, and it wants young people, any ones that it can attract. We have Manor High School that has an arrangement where they school in the city, that their children at 11 plus can go to Manor High School. It is the result of almost privatisation of the education system. So consequently, what happens after they fill the children up on whatever criteria the school governors decide, so every school will have its own criteria, they allocate the places. And if there are any spare places over, anybody can go into any school in Oadby. And Oadby, let's be quite honest, has very, very good schools. So the Oadby schools are providing massive school places for the children in the city because they want to come to the good Oadby schools. Interestingly enough, a child that leaves the city and goes into the county has far less per annum spent on their education than city children, because as we heard before, the county is the lowest funded county in England, and the city has more per child to spend on a child. So money does not follow the child, it comes from the county to pay. So we have a system now that children move into Oadby midterm, the schools are full up. And we have children going as far as Great Glen. Some of the secondary schools are travelling 10 miles to get into a school place. It's absolute madness. And this was what the government wanted. It wanted the good schools to thrive and they'll make them bigger and bigger. And the less successful schools, they wanted to drive them out of business. That's free market economics. So the authority, Leicestershire County Council, have the problem of providing the places, but they're not helped by this Wild West in school. And schools are battling with each other. And I don't think your suggestion, Councillor Allen, about trying to do a deal with the school, that doesn't work. It's with the county council. So I hope I sort of fill people in the difficulties and the madness with our school places. But I wanted to go back. My original putting a hand up was this business about housing. I wish people would be honest about housing. Everybody blames it onto each other. There's some paperwork going around here at the moment. It went around 2 years ago. Every time there's an election, it seems to upset our local member of parliament. Houses are there because people need them. People need somewhere to live. And the problem is that people already living in houses, and I declare an interest. I'm very fortunate I'm living in a lovely house in a lovely part of Oadby. If there's a shortage, the value of my house goes up. Marvellous. People are struggling, young people are struggling to get houses, but I'm sitting pretty. The value of my house goes up. I don't think since I've been on the council, when I first joined in 1973, and Oadby and Wixon have grown quite dramatically there, I don't think anybody ever welcomed a house on the green field at the end of their garden. And some of the people in houses now are complaining because their houses upset the people behind them, and they're being upset by the people who are going to be built behind their back gardens. So it really annoys me when I see stuff going out. I've seen it going out in election literature where blaming us for the houses, and nobody's turning around and saying people need somewhere to live. Good planning is good. Get the 106 money, get the infrastructure in. People are quite right in saying, you know, my doctor's surgery is bursting at the seams, or I can't get my kids into school. Well, that's the system we've just dealt with. So let's be honest. People need somewhere to live. Most of us sitting around this table here, I assume, have got a vested interest and want to see our houses rise, the value of our houses rise. So be honest, I'm happy that young people, I would like to see young people, everybody, to be entitled to a good, decent home. So I'm not ashamed to be a part of an authority that welcomes young people and builds affordable homes. In fact, we're going to build some ourselves, aren't we, in the old swimming pool site. I'm happy to do that. And I hold my hand up that that's the right thing to do. But be honest. Don't let the Tories make the laws and say we've got to build the houses, Councillor Lloydell was saying, and then blame us for building them. We've quoted that letter. I mean, it appears to be if you want to be a builder, you go and have dinner with somebody who's a minister at a Tory party dinner somewhere, pay your way in, you can sit next to the minister and you can get planning consent you wouldn't normally get. So look, let's be honest, we need houses in the right place for the right people at prices young people can afford. I feel better now. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Coughlin. Right, anybody have anything to add to that? No. Can you please raise your hand if you're willing to second that agenda item, please? Thank you, Councillor Coughlin. So this item has been moved by Councillor Boyce, seconded by Councillor Coughlin. So once again, we'll go to a recorded style vote. Mr. Tucker, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Bentley.
For.
Councillor Bolter.
For.
Councillor Boyce.
For.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
For.
Councillor Carter.
For.
Councillor Charlesworth.
I'm sorry, I seem to have dropped out of the meeting at some point through a technical issue. I'd like to vote, but the monitoring officer says not to, so I won't.
Thank you. Councillor Dar.
For.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
For.
Councillor Gamble.
For.
Councillor Hack.
For.
Councillor Joshi,
Against.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman,
We can't hear you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Lily Kaufman,
For.
Councillor Kozlowski,
For.
Councillor David Lloydall,
For.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall,
For.
Councillor Sharon Morris.
For.
Sorry, Your Worship, can I ask for a piece of clarification? Councillor Joshi has just voted against. Now, putting it simply, if this was, if I was in that situation, Mr. Gill quite rightly would be asking me for reasons why. Because in reality, Charnwood, who we are supporting with this piece of paper, is not a Liberal Democrat council, it's actually a Tory council. So Councillor Joshi appears to want to undermine a Tory council and undermine government policy, yet has given no reason. So I think it's only reasonable that we ask the question for clarification.
Mr. Gill?
Thank you, Your Worship. The statement of common ground needs approving by the council, and quite clearly there was just a majority in favour of the statement. I don't think that it's my role to enter into the politics as to why Councillor Joshi voted in the way that she did. That is a political matter. You know, the fact is, Charn would require the policy, the statement to be approved. The statement is approved, and that's as far as we go at the moment, I'm afraid.
With all due respect, Your Worship, I actually asked Councillor Joshi the question.
Councillor Joshi?
All due respect, thank you, Chair. You didn't ask me the question, but you mentioned me and David Gill. I voted the way I wanted to vote. I'm not going to politicise everything, as you all have been doing all night. I don't want to go down that route. I'm not going to be drawn into agreeing with everything. I don't agree with this at all. I don't think we should be held accountable for it, and I will challenge. It's my wish. If I want to challenge, I'll challenge. It may change things, it may not, but it's my opinion.
That's fine. I'm more than happy with that answer. I think it needs to be recorded that Councillor Joshi appears to object to the government's policy. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Joshi, carry on.
I really don't have a problem with that, and I will speak to whoever I need to speak to with my decision. That's where I think we've gone wrong over the years. You have to challenge. If you don't challenge, we're going to end up in this situation financially again.
Your Worship, the vote has now been taken, so the item's been determined. So for the purpose of the minutes, there was 17 votes in favour, 1 against. The item is now dealt with. I suggest we move on.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Agenda item 16, proposed car park strategy 2021 to 2026. Mrs. Kind, please.
Thank you very much. The report that you have in front of you is the outcome of a request at full council on the 18th of February for officers to draw up a car park strategy to put before members. So the document that you have here is that strategy. It's useful to point out that the provision of car parking is not actually a statutory requirement, but it is accepted that it's a function the council wants to be involved in. And in putting the strategy together, we're looking at the objectives that we can put forward and what we need to do to achieve those objectives in order to run a good car park service and deliver value for money, as well as being able to provide some improvements to our car parks. I'll come to the strategy in just a moment, but assuming that members agree to adopt the strategy, we'd be looking at a period of consultation and circulating the strategy out far and wide. Obviously, the usual methods of doing that through the website and social media, but also to include local businesses, residents in the area that might be affected by it, particularly those that surround the car parks, and also any of the religious buildings that are served by our car parks. Moving on to the strategy itself, if we move down to page 253, you will see at the top of that page the 4 points, 1 to 4, which are the objectives that the strategy is looking to achieve. And they are dealt with in more detail further on in the report, where it details the actions that we need to take in order to meet those objectives. On page 254, there's some background information on parking in the borough in general. So it looks at the off-street parking provision and what is happening at the moment, as well as on-street, which is managed by Leicestershire County Council. It explains the enforcement that we have currently, and then further on goes into further detail about parking for people with disabilities, blue badge parking, as well as private parking, and looks at how we will try to engage local businesses and the parking that they have, but also recognises what we need to do ourselves to ensure that we've got dialogue with businesses and that we're enabling vitality in the town centres. The next few pages go into detail on the objectives and what we need to do to meet those objectives. But objective 4 in particular is looking at how we would deliver a self-financing car park service. That would cover all of the costs of providing the service and also all of the costs in objectives 1 to 3, which are improvements to our current parking provision. The proposals then, starting on page 257, look at the existing enforcement times. So at the moment, we enforce our regulations between 8 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock at night, Monday to Saturday inclusive. But we would be looking to extend that to 8 until 6 on 7 days a week, and including public holidays as well. And then below that, we go into further detail about the individual car parks. We have 3 car parks at the moment that are long stay car parks, as in over 3-hour stays. And those car parks are currently have a charge applied to them, and that's 3 hours. It's £3 for 3 hours or more stay. All of our other car parks at the moment are free for up to 3 hour stays. The town centre car parks are listed first. It then goes on to the country parks and leisure facilities, which we've clussed as Brox Hill and Parklands. They're identified separately, but in effect cover a very close area, so really are combined as one. And also Wigston Swimming Pool. The down on page 261, it then lists Kirkdale Road car park. I've got that one separately, purely and simply because it's mostly used by local residents, but is also provided for rail users at the moment. I think that's a summary of the report. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Thank you. Let's just see if we've got any hands up. Sorry, let's have a look.
Your Worship, just to clarify, Councillor Charlesworth has left the meeting at 3 minutes past 9 for the record.
Okay, thank you. Just let me interject before we go any further. I don't know how people think, but I was thinking we could have a comfort break after this item before we deal with the excluded item. Is everybody okay with that? Thank you. So
tiddle now, actually.
Well, you'd have to wait just a minute. Just a moment. Councillor Boyce, do you want to go now or do you want to wait till afterwards?
No, I'm going to go now, if I may.
Please.
Can I first of all start by congratulating Margaret on what is actually a superb report. I I think the amount of work they've already undertaken is superb, and I think they should be thanked and congratulated on it. However, there is one slight amendment which I know will take a little time to have a look at. So I'm afraid I'm going to ask that the consultation is delayed a short period of time. What I'd like the officers to do is to have a quick examination of being able to supply a number of ultra short stay car parking for people who are nipping in to do a single errand and have no intention of staying or dwelling at all. I have noticed, not only in this country, but even abroad now, there are little 15 and 20-minute car parking spaces. So can we actually have a quick look at doing that? And I'm aware that that will result in a delay to the consultation. So can I ask for the recommendation to be amended so that the draft be approved and the public consultation starts on the 15th of May? So, but the issue of the ultra short stay car parking can be addressed within that. Thank you. Oh, and on that assumption, I move.
Yes, I can include that.
Thank you. Let's have a look. Councillor Bentley, please.
Thank you, Worship. I'd also like to reiterate what Councillor Boyce just said. A very thorough report, a lot of good work done by Margaret, and I thank her for that. She's worked very well and given us a lot of information, because we did ask for an awful lot of information regarding this, because as a Liberal Democrat council, it's a contentious issue for us, because we've always stated that we don't charge for the first 3 hours of parking in our town centres. I'm very happy that we're going out for consultation, and very happy that Councillor Boyce has put in the recommendation to delay that. As you know, I travel all over the country and visit lots and lots of town centres, and there are short stay free parking spaces in the majority of them. I actually parked in one today in Royston. So I'm very happy that that's included. Although I generally don't agree with charging for car parking, I'm happy that we're going out for consultation, because that's what we've always stated that we will do to our residents. And I will be very, I look forward to hearing what the residents say and hope that we take it into account. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. Mr. Gill, please, I understand you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to mention that if you're going to have a comfort break after this matter, you may wish to consider suspending standing orders, because meetings only last until 3 hours. And if we have this discussion, have a short 10-minute break, then you're going to be in a position by 10 o'clock where you're literally going to have to go to the vote when not everybody has perhaps had made their contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Councillor Joshi, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Margaret. Excellent report. I second that and third that. I just wanted to ask the question, why are we charging on Sundays and bank holidays? Generally, car parks don't, the ones I've been to, and most of them in London and nearby, they don't usually charge for a bank holiday or a Sunday. Is that something that you'd kind of probed into and decided that that would be an option?
We're looking at it in terms of equality. We have a number of religious buildings around our car parks, and what we're trying to do is to equate what we're doing in one car park with what we're doing in another car park. And I think it's fair to say that it would be wrong to impose charges on one section of the community that we're not doing equally to another section of the community.
Okay, no, I get that. I wondered whether it was something to do with that as well. That's fine.
Councillor Carter, please.
Like the other speakers, I would also like to thank Margaret for this excellent report, and probably with a slight bias, particularly the inclusion of objective 3, because whilst this is a car parking strategy, I think the comments that were made in the response to the Public Realm SPD indicated a desire amongst our residents to encourage sustainable travel within the borough. So the bullet points 4 and 5 about ensuring that that we have well-designed secure cycle racks and proper pedestrian shortcuts where there are desire lines through our car parks is to be commended. As a ward councillor for Oby St Peters, which includes the town centre, there are parking is often an issue, a casework that comes my way. So I'm pleased to see that this car parking strategy addresses one of those issues, which is the residents along Leicester Road in Oadby, which do not have their own parking, and because they're on a main thoroughfare, they cannot have any on-street parking. So I'm pleased to see that in this strategy, it includes the provision of resident parking permits for residents along that stretch of the road. So that also is to be commended.
Your Worship, I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave this meeting shortly, and I want my vote when I come back. So it's up to you. I'm just pushing off, and I'm telling you I'm doing it because...
Well, if you leave council...
All right. Do you want to?
I move the meeting suspended for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Bush. We'll suspend the meeting for 5 minutes. Thank you.
For the benefit of any members of the public following along on the live stream, this meeting will now be suspended for 5 minutes. Could all councillors and officers please place themselves on mute, and we will reconvene in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, everybody's back. So we're now going to go back to Councillor Carter. Councillor Carter, please.
Thank you, Chair. The other matter relating to casework that I have regularly experienced is issues of parking in Churchill Close, which is very close proximity to the town centre. And we do seem to get a high degree of displacement parking there, where people are choosing not to use our car parks, but to park on what is essentially is a residential road. I do have a concern that this parking strategy may exacerbate that problem, and it is a particular problem because the residents of Churchill Close often have mobility impairment and have a need for accessible parking. So I'm pleased to see that objective 1, the 5th bullet point, talks about working with Leicestershire County Council to examine the desirability for additional on-street residential parking areas. And I would commend that objective and ask that that be pursued if we vote in favour of this strategy with some vigour, because we have tried to encourage the County Council to introduce a resident-only parking area in that area without any success. So I would encourage that would ask that that be pursued with some vigour. But I'm very happy with this strategy and more than happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. We're now going to Councillor Bolter, please.
No, thank you. Yes, I support the strategy. We need to ask our residents. We always ask our residents when we're going to do something, consult them, and we've always done that since we've been in charge of the council. I'm pleased with the leader's statement about short stay. Yes, it'd be nice if we could do some places for that. I noticed the car park in Ober's already got 20 minutes green bays for short period of parking. Whether electric vehicles are displaced that or not, I don't know, but that is in existence already. And the whole strategy is very well put together. Whether we want to do it or not is a personal thing, but you know, we've got to move forward on these things. So I support the strategy and hope we can get some consultants from our residents that will back it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolter. Mrs. Kine, did you want to come in now? Did you have something else you wish to add?
It was only to pick up on the point that Councillor Carter made and to say that I have regular meetings with the County Council on parking matters, that with all the districts, but particularly with the county, and we're always looking at parking provision and on-street parking. So to allay any fears that he may have had, they do come up and are discussed on a regular basis.
Thank you. Councillor Hack, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to go back to the point that Councillor Joshi made regarding the Sundays and bank holidays. Mrs. Kind, I know you mentioned that it's due to equalities issues. Can we not come to some sort of agreement or look for an alternative how to deal with any other faiths that might be impacted by this, and see if we can go back to not charging for Sundays and bank holidays? And if we need to, look at other authorities, how they deal with that issue.
Well, I think that's up to members to decide. Yes, we can look at that. But, I mean, it's up to a member decision as to whether you want it to cover 7 days or not. I have done a little bit of research on those car parks from our adjacent districts. I've not yet found a car park which serves, I've found plenty of car parks that serve Christian churches, but not so much either mosques or Hindu temples, etc. So it's a bit difficult to find a comparison, certainly locally.
Thank you. Councillor Hack, want to come back?
Then I would ask if we could look at an alternative agreement with those faith members, if we can maybe suspend for half an hour charging and allow Sundays and bank holidays but not to be charged, not to be included in the scheme.
Your Worship,
Sorry, yes, Councillor Boyce.
sorry to interrupt. The whole point of doing a consultation is for these matters to be raised and discussed. And I think sensibly, it's been moved and seconded. The general gist of the strategy is absolutely fine. By going out to consult, we will be able to at least identify these issues and, if necessary, resolve them. But I think the important point is that once the issue's been worked out about the short stay, which will take a few weeks, then we can go out to consultation on the date I suggested.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Councillor Gamble, please. You need to unmute, Councillor Gamble.
I do apologise. I thought I did. I have to say, I totally agree with Councillor Hack and Councillor Boyce. We are going out to consultation. I would hate to see a tax on religious worship, which I think it would be. If we could sort of come out with some sort of permit for people of faith to go to their churches and temples and mosques, I would very much support that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to this item has been moved by Councillor Boyce and seconded by Councillor Carter. So we'll now go to the recorded vote. Mr. Tucker?
Sorry, Your Worship, can I just clarify, because I think during the course of the debate, a motion to amend the recommendation was moved. So are we voting on the motion to amend, or are we going straight to are we assuming that the amendment is being absorbed into the substantive recommendation?
Your Worship, if it assists, I believe Councillor Boyce moved the recommendation subject to the amendment, and then it was seconded, so it's a composite motion. I'll stand corrected if that's not the case, Councillor Boyce. If you want to mute yourself, Councillor Boyce.
Still muted.
Councillor Boyce, you need to unmute.
Sorry, my screen had disappeared and I was desperately trying to find myself. Yes, I believe it's a composite motion, and therefore it's not exactly an amendment. It's slight change, but that's all. So as I said, I move.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Tucker.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Adams.
4.
Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Bentley.
4.
Councillor Bolter.
4.
Councillor Boyce.
4.
Councillor Linda Broadley.
Hold on, have we got her? Hold on. I can't see where she is.
No.
Your Worship, it appears that Councillor Broadley is not connected to the meeting.
So we'll carry on then.
Okay. Councillor Carter.
In favour, 4.
Councillor Charlesworth. I think he's left, hasn't he? Apologies.
He left, yeah.
Councillor Dar.
4.
Councillor Linda Eaton.
4.
Councillor Gamble.
4.
Councillor Hack.
4.
Councillor Joshi.
4.
Councillor Jeffrey Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Lily Kaufman.
4.
Councillor Kozlowski.
4.
Councillor David Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Kevin Lloydall.
4.
Councillor Sharon Morris.
4.
Thank you, Your Worship. That's 17 votes in favour.
Thank you. Agenda item 17, exclusion of the press and public. I now move that under section 100A, paragraph 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that the business to be transacted involves the disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act as amended. And in all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining the exempt items outweighs the public interest in disclosing the exempt information. Do I have a seconder, please?
Move.
Thank you. Thank you. Unless members have any objections, may that motion be approved by general affirmation. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. Do you wish to deal with the matter of suspending the standing orders now?
I think so. Shall we carry on and do that? So I now move that we suspend the standing orders so that we continue the meeting beyond the 3 hours. Do I have a seconder, please?
I second it.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Unless members have any objections, may that motion be approved by general affirmation.
Can I just ask your worship, and perhaps we can get some advice, is it all the standing orders that you're suspending or one particular standing order? What is the standing order that's being suspended?
Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Your Worship, it's Standing Order 4.2.1.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that was agreed by general affirmation. And going back to the exclusion, for the benefit of any members of the press and public observing, the live stream of this meeting will now be stopped.